Ever since March 15th, Washington has barraged Sanaa from the sky, killing and injuring countless innocent civilians while destroying vital infrastructure. For example, on April 2nd, U.S. jets targeted a reservoir in western Yemen, cutting off access to water for over 50,000 people. 3 days later, Donald Trump gloatingly posted a horrific video on social media of a tribal gathering being incinerated in a U.S. airstrike. The president falsely claimed the individuals were in fact Houthis gathered for instructions on an attack. In a chilling coincidence, the blood-curdling clip was published on the 15th anniversary of the release of Collateral Murder by WikiLeaks. Gut-wrenching footage filmed 3 years earlier of U.S. Apache helicopter pilots firing indiscriminately at a group of Iraqi civilians and Reuters journalists while sickly cackling at the carnage they were inflicting. While that disclosure caused international outcry and scandal and made WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange an internationally wanted man, openly advertising unconscionable war crimes is now apparently formal U.S. government policy. U.S. officials have pledged that renewed hostilities against Yemen will continue indefinitely, while Trump has bragged how relentless strikes have decimated Ansar Allah. Yet, on April 4th, the New York Times reported Pentagon officials are privately briefing that while the current bombing campaign is consistently heavier than strikes conducted by the Biden administration, the effort has achieved only limited success in destroying the Houthis' vast, largely underground arsenal of missiles, drones, and launchers. Ansar Allah's anti-genocide Red Sea blockade thus endures untrammeled. Moreover, in just 3 weeks, the Pentagon has used $200 million worth of munitions, in addition to the immense operational and personnel costs to deploy 2 aircraft carriers, additional B-2 bombers and fighter jets, as well as Patriot and THAAD air defenses to the Middle East. The operation's total cost to date could exceed well over $1 billion by next week. This not only means supplemental funds for the operation need to be sought from Congress, but there are grave internal anxieties about ammunition availability. So many precision munitions are being used, especially advanced long-range ones, that some Pentagon contingency planners are growing concerned about overall Navy stocks and implications for any situation in which the United States would have to ward off an attempted invasion of Taiwan by China. The New York Times also observed the White House hasn't indicated why it thinks its campaign against the group will succeed, after the Biden administration's long-running Operation Prosperity Guardian embarrassingly failed to break the Red Sea's blockade. The answer is simple. For 3 decades, the empire has been consumed by a dangerously self-deluded belief in the primacy of air power over all other forms of warfare. Ergo, the Trump administration believes that if only it intensifies Yemen's bombardment, Ansar Allah will finally crumble. Campaign analysis. Contemporary declassified British Ministry of Defense files amply underline the catastrophic failure of the empire's blitzkrieg of Yugoslavia. Once Milosevic finally capitulated and NATO and UN peacekeepers were granted unimpeded access to Kosovo, they struggled to find a single burnt-out tank or other indications of vehicle or equipment losses on the ground. A June 7th campaign analysis noted NATO took a lot longer, required a lot more effort, and damaged less than perhaps we believed we could achieve at the start of the air campaign. It added that Yugoslav warfighting doctrine placed great emphasis on dispersal, the use of camouflage, dummy targets, concealment, and bunkers to avoid detection, and early assessments indicate that they appear to have applied this doctrine very successfully. Adverse weather conditions were also routinely exploited as cover for anti-KLA operations. The memo further recorded there was no evidence of disintegration of Serb forces in Kosovo, with Yugoslav military operations continuing apace until Milosevic agreed to withdraw from the province and beyond. Yet, these damning observations remain secret. At a June 11, 1999 press conference, U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Henry Shelton proudly displayed a variety of colorful charts boasting how hundreds of Yugoslav tanks, personnel carriers, and artillery pieces had been decimated by NATO, without the alliance suffering a single casualty. His crooked accounting of the bombing remained universal mainstream gospel, until a May 2000 Newsweek investigation exposed the wide-ranging cover-up via which the Pentagon had spun the ineffective assault as a resounding success. When NATO's Supreme Allied Commander Wesley Clark, who oversaw the bombing, learned of the pronounced lack of damage to the Yugoslav military on the ground in Kosovo, he dispatched a dedicated team of USAF investigators to the province. They spent weeks combing Kosovo by helicopter and by foot and turned up evidence of just 14 destroyed tanks. Meanwhile, of the 744 strikes on Yugoslav military equipment and installations claimed by Pentagon officials, just 58 were confirmed. By contrast, USAF identified ample evidence of the Yugoslav military's extraordinary skill at deception. They found a key bridge had been protected from NATO bombers by constructing, 300 yards upstream, a fake bridge made of polyethylene sheeting stretched over the river. NATO destroyed the phony bridge many times. Additionally, artillery pieces were faked out of long black logs stuck on old truck wheels, and an anti-aircraft missile launcher was fabricated from the metal-lined paper used to make European milk cartons. Flummoxed, Clark insisted that the Serbs had hidden their damaged equipment and that the team hadn't looked hard enough. So a new report was fabricated whole cloth, validating the fiction NATO's destruction of Yugoslav forces had been extensive. Newsweek noted its findings were so devoid of hard data that Pentagon officials jokingly called it fiber-free. An official Department of Defense after-action report to Congress on the bombing campaign cited the report's figures, although stressed no supporting evidence was forthcoming. With eerie prescience, Newsweek concluded, this distortion could badly mislead future policymakers. After the November 2000 presidential election, the Pentagon will go through one of its quadrennial reviews, assigning spending priorities. The Air Force will claim the lion's share. The risk is policymakers and politicians will become even more wedded to myths like surgical strikes. The lesson of Kosovo is civilian bombing works, though it raises moral qualms. Against military targets, high-altitude bombing is overrated. Any commander-in-chief who does not face up to those hard realities will be fooling himself. Incredibly different. The distortion that NATO's bombing of Yugoslavia was a military triumph has endured ever since. Not only has it served as justification for multiple subsequent calamitous Western interventions, such as the 2011 destruction of Libya, but USAF continues to claim the lion's share of U.S. defense spending. According to 2024 figures, over a quarter of Washington's total defense budget, $216.1 billion, is earmarked for the Air Force. Additionally, $202.6 billion is spent on the Navy, which typically operates in close tandem with USAF. Intimidatingly large, these figures may appear on paper, but they do not translate into serious warfighting capability, as Operation Prosperity Guardian amply underscored. A little noticed July 2024 Associated Press report on the return home of U.S. fighter pilots after 9 months of failing to thwart Ansar Allah's Red Sea blockade noted that battling an enemy capable of fighting back in the most intense running sea battle the Navy has faced since World War II had been deeply psychologically ravaging for all concerned. As a result, Pentagon officials were investigating how to tend to thousands of pilots and sailors adversely affected by their involvement in the bruising effort, including counseling and treatment for possible post-traumatic stress. One pilot told Associated Press, "Most of us weren't used to being fired on, given the nation's previous military engagements in recent decades." He described the experience of Ansar Allah's retaliation as incredibly different and traumatizing, as getting shot at is something that we don't think about a lot. A new experience it may be, but it's one Washington needs to urgently adapt to. A July 2024 RAND Corporation report found the U.S. military was woefully ill-equipped to sustain a major conflict with peer-level competitors, such as China, for any length of time, while facing significant threats from relatively unsophisticated actors, such as Ansar Allah, who have been able to obtain and use modern technology, e.g. drones, to strategic effect. Since then, Axios has reported Pentagon weapons procurer Bill LaPlante, a journeyman engineer and physicist, is awed by Ansar Allah's use of increasingly sophisticated weapons, including missiles that can do things that are just amazing. He claims the resistance group's capabilities are getting scary. Once the U.S. has exhausted itself yet again, failing to crush Ansar Allah, we could see more of its arsenal in play, and in turn, another historic defeat of the empire, as Yemen inflicted over the course of Operation Prosperity Guardian.